Hey, it's Drybear. We're back with another Diablo 4 build guide. This time for the Druid, we're going to talk about the full Earth caster build, the Earthen Might Druid. Now, I've already made a Bear Earth hybrid build on this channel that you'll find linked elsewhere, but this one's going to focus on pure Earth spells. But first, you should consider joining my live stream. If you don't, the next time you find yourself walking out in public, you're going to have to adjust yourself in some way. Walk over to a nearby mirror and start fixing your face and realize that the mirror was not a mirror, but just a very shiny window. And someone was on the other side watching you, and now it's awkward. We'll start off this Earthen Might build with Earth Spike. It is our Earth builder. It makes perfect sense. There is a modifier for this that we used for our Earth Bear build that allows Earth Spike to deal more damage, but have a longer cooldown. In this case, we're not going to use that because we just need to have one builder for this to get our spirit up so we can spend it on Landslide. So we're going to run Earth Spike on this. We want the chance to stun, and the Fortify is nice. It's not necessary, but it's nice, and it does give you more chance for defensives as well as being able to keep yourself healthy. Our spender is going to be Landslide, and there's some awesome legendaries that go with Landslide. It's actually one of my favorite builds to use because it just has some really cool interactions, and if you get things just lined up, it's very positional. You can get some crazy earth damage coming out of it. So we're running Landslide as our spender. This will spend our natural resource Spirit. We also get the modifiers. After Landslide damages enemy 4 times, the next hit will immobilize. We'll get bonuses for this that we'll talk about later. And then when you immobilize or stun an enemy, you gain a Terra Mote. Now, either of the alternate paths for Landslide can actually work. It depends, I think, on your gear, and there might be some min-maxing that we'll have to figure out on which one works better. I think the Terra Mote version is probably a little bit easier to use and probably better for leveling, and the other option is going to be better once you have better gear and you're towards the end game, especially once you start unlocking Paragon. And that's Raging Landslide, which gives you a chance to, when you strike an immobilize or stun target, you get another pillar spawn. You can double up and get some nice damage on here. I just don't know if this is going to be, you won't be able to recreate this as much while leveling, so I kind of hold it off for this build. But once you get later on, I would recommend trying out this variant or Landslide to see what kind of damage numbers you can get. In the spender tree, there's also some useful passives for this build. Heart of the Wild is nice. While you have lower amounts of skill points, I recommend just getting 1 point to unlock the following passive, but having maximum spirit is nice. You're going to be spending a lot of spirit, and you also get scalars based on how much spirit you have. So having more means that you can cap out a little bit longer and then be able to spend that more properly, and it also unlocks basic skills generate additional spirit. Earth Spike can be rather difficult to get a large amount of spirit generation. Once you get through Paragons and you have perfect gear, it's possible you don't need these passives, but in my testing, I found that I did need it in order to keep the amount of spirit that we're generating higher. So this could be something that goes away, so keep it in mind. But I would say if you're just trying this out, either for an early build or for an early character you just made, I would recommend getting these passives. Next, we're gonna get Cyclone Armor. This skill has so many interesting synergies within the elemental builds for Druid, and we'll pick it up for this one. If you have Cyclone Armor, not only does this give you some nice magic damage reduction, which is very much needed in some encounters and some dungeons, you also have the knockback on top of it and some bonus damage. So it'll knock back targets and slow them, and also they'll become vulnerable, which is a nice damage amp. So on demand, you can get a nice knockback and some damage reduction, which is useful. And there's also some modifiers and legendaries we'll use for this one in particular. On to Companion, we pick up Vine Creeper. This is a nice static amount of damage. It gives you some nice ticking, and it's useful for single target as well when you're fighting bosses. The main reason we want Vine Creeper in this build is because Earth Magic scales exceptionally well with Immobilize and hard CCs like stuns. So being able to, in mass, immobilize or root all targets around you not only gives you a great way to stack up targets for things like Boulder and for Earth Spike and positioning for Landslide, but it also will give you significant damage increases on your Earth spells once the build is complete. And we want to spend the extra points to get the extended duration of Immobilize, which increases our Earth damage, but also a crit strike chance against targets that are strangled by Vine Creeper, because we have such high natural crit damage from Earth spells that this extra crit chance goes a long way. Next, it should come as no surprise for Wrath that we pick up Boulder. This thing hits like a truck, and it's so positional. It's so much fun to use. So use Boulder. It does extra Earth damage. If you have an overpower crit for it, and you hit enemies that are enemies get stunned, which gives you even more Earth damage, and you have a chance to crit with that. Since this isn't a fortify build, I wouldn't run the extra fortify on it. I would just run the crit chance increase every time it deals damage, especially if you get a nice Vine Creeper immobilized, you get everything stacked up on top of a landslide, especially if it's against a wall, you can get some pretty high crit chance on Boulder. And I've had this Boulder hit incredibly hard when everything lines up. Next, you're gonna wanna pick up these passives. If you're below level 30 or 35, you may miss some of these initially as you start unlocking more options. But as you push towards 50 and get Paragon, you're gonna wanna get these passives. All three of these passives are excellent for Earth. They give you some nice scalers. And again, we want heavy CC and extra bonus damage on targets. So we're gonna be able to get this slowed, stunned, immobilized, knocked back enemies. Stone Guard can actually be pretty useful in this build. Unlike the Earth Bear build where you actually will have a large amount of HP, if you run for more of a streamlined, more glass cannon build, getting Fortify for over 50% of your max life isn't actually all that hard and will give you a nice scaler on your Earth damage. For ultimate, we get Petrify. Of course we do. It is our Earth magic ultimate. It does count as nature magic as well, and this one's great because it will stun all targets in area. You have increased critical damage and critical strike to targets that are affected by it, and the bonus is increased when you get against bosses because obviously you can't stun bosses. You won't be able to have that, so it's nice to have this in here. You get crit damage scaled up significantly, plus a longer duration against bosses. And Landslide has a nice Terra Mote bonus for this as well. So your single target won't suffer from having an inability to CC targets, especially if you're using Petrify with Landslide. Then lastly, for key passive, we're getting Earth and Magic. This one has some nice benefits for Lucky Hit. So you can actually add Lucky Hit to your build pretty easily, irrespective of the build you have. You can find Lucky Hit and equip it and have it as part of your build pretty easily. It also will give you a chance that when you damage enemies with Earth skills, which remember Landslide can have a passive trigger and it's triggering damage all the time. Same thing for Earth Spike. Boulder hits multiple times, so you get a nice chance to proc all of these. To restore all your spirit, which will be useful for the legendaries we'll talk about in a second. And it gives you guaranteed crits, which gives you nice value back on all the crit damage that Earth skills have passively. And if you're against a target that is stunned, immobilized, or knocked back, you'll get bonus damage and more crit chance on that. 10% for critical strikes on top of that. And then it'll just be kind of a passive thing for bosses since you'll be hitting them so regular. The legendary that gives you Earth skills slow. Remember, slow is in the crowd control category. So anything that says that it affects a target that is under crowd control, then this one will affect it. And all of your Earth skills will give you a nice bonus to being able to slow if the target can be slowed. And when you're clearing trash mobs and high density areas, you will be getting tons of slows. It helps with kiting. It helps with grouping mobs up. It's nice to be able to do this. And all of your skills, except for 1 or 2, are going to be Earth. So you'll be able to trigger this pretty regularly. When you have Fortify, your Earth skills gain +2 ranks. This one's pretty easy to pick up. You may want to figure out how you want to put Fortify in the build. It doesn't actually matter too much. You could replace Cyclone Armor with Earth and Bulwark if you wanted. Plenty of the Earth skills have modifiers that allow you to build Fortify. There's even a passive that gives you Fortify when you do crit damage or crits or hits with Earth skills in general. So this one is an easy one to activate for us. We'll be able to have this, and then all of your Earth skills will have +2 ranks on top. Basic skills gain attack speed. This is super nice for Earth Spike, especially if you're running the Earth Spike that doesn't have the longer cooldown. So you'll be able to get a lot more building off of this. And we do actually rely quite a lot on Earth Spike in this build. Just to be able to get enough spirit for spending. And we also want Landslide's Earth Pillars strike a second time and deal a bonus damage per hit. This one, again, if you can get everyone trapped up together, nice density, you get the creeper out and root them, and then you put them one in one spot, you can get multiple landslides on top and throw out a boulder, and the damage output is insane, especially if you get a boss that doesn't move as much, or like a world boss that maybe has a big hitbox. This can actually do insane, ridiculous damage as these hit multiple times. You'll see the pillars strike twice and you'll get bonus damage. You can even get bonus landslide. From the Raging Landslide passive, which we talked about earlier, this might be something that's more for late game, but once you get it, crazy. You can also play around with Aspect of the Umbral. This one is when you crowd control an enemy, you get primary resource. This allows you to, when you get those big high density impacts, you'll be able to get high amounts of spirit generation, which will then you just spend on landslide. I tested this a little bit at the level that we were able to play at, and it didn't seem to be all that valuable. And again, this legendary won't affect boss fights, so you'll kind of have to play with that. Maybe you have this in your bag or in your inventory when you're ready to swap in for just clearing trash, and then you swap it out when you go to boss fights. But it's something to think about that could work well with this build. If you do run Cyclone Armor with this build, and I recommend you do, because you should be able to build Fortify without the use of things like Earthen Bulwark, then Cyclone Armor getting physical damage on top of its magical damage reduction is super useful, so Aspect of Cyclonic Force is a nice pickup. Aspect of the Expectant can be very good if you have good spirit generation. Again, at low levels, Earth Spike by itself may not be enough to get good value out of Aspect of the Expectant, but as you approach higher levels and max level, you should be able to get good value out of this with other ways to generate spirit, especially with your Earth and Might key passive, which would give you more spirit generation on Earth damage. Nice to use here, and it gives you bonus damage on Landslide, which does incredible amounts of burst. Crash Stone Aspect is a nice pickup for trash clearing. Earth skills deal more critical strike damage to crowd-controlled enemies, and remember, this does include slows. So when you run the aspect that allows you to, all Earth skills apply slow, you'll get this 100% uptime on Crash Stone Aspect if the target can be crowd-controlled, because the slow will trigger this. Edgemaster's Aspect is also a great pickup, just like the one we just talked about 2 months ago, that it gives you bonus damage when you have higher spirit. So once you have good resource generation, this will make Landslide even stronger.
If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.